Welcome to the podcast, episode 106. Hard to believe that we've been doing this for this long, but we have. I want to talk about gun control. And the reason I want to talk about gun control is that we've just, as I'm recording this, we've just had two new mass shootings, one in El Paso, Texas, at a Walmart, and the other in Dayton. These shootings were dragged into the political sphere almost immediately, and dragged into the political sphere in a decidedly ugly way. The thing that's appalling about this. So, for example, this is all still new, and we don't know what we'll know later. But the one in El Paso appears to have been racially motivated, targeting Hispanics, and in the popular parlance would have been a crime from the right. The one in Dayton was a crime from the left. The guy appeared to have been a supporter of Elizabeth Warren and cheering on Antifa and so on. So we've got these two shootings, and we have candidates for president immediately blaming the party, the opposing political party. And the thing that is quite striking about it is that people are not speaking in measured tones at all. In other words, I think that there's a legitimate political debate that well-intentioned people could have, where one person could argue that we need gun control in order to cut down on these mass shootings, and the other position being that we'd best not have gun control because we want to reduce these mass shootings. But the way the debate has deteriorated, people are talking as though their political opponents want the mass shootings. They want the bloodshed. They want the children to die, and so forth. In other words, you're supporting this instead of saying your policies are ineffectual. Your policies that are aiming at our shared goal are ineffectual. That's a political debate. You're a blood ghoul, just like the shooter, and you are happy when people die, just like the shooter was happy when people die, is an indication that our political system is on its last legs. In other words, when a random shooting occurs in a Walmart and the opposing political party that has a different policy approach to how these shootings should be minimized, or how we could have them be a rare event. When someone who has a different policy approach is lumped by you into the same category as the shooter, just as bad as the shooter, you've got blood on your hands, you're evil, you're vile. What that is that's not a cry for less shooting. That is the prelude to more shooting. In other words, there's certain things that you could, as they say in the political sphere, certain things you could walk back. But other times the rhetoric gets so heated and so out there, there's no way to walk it back. And I believe that we are very much at this point in our nation. All we need is one or two more close elections, and people are going to go get their guns. It's and you can tell that this is where you can tell that the pot is almost at a full boil already because when violent episodes like these shootings occur, and the people in the auditorium, the people in the stands, the people in the stadium are immediately themselves consumed with bloodlust and blood-curdling language, and you deserve to die, and this sort of thing. That's not an approach that will reduce the shooting. That's an approach that is going to result in a lot more shooting. Oh, whether we will be God. So, Plodcast, episode 106. We come now to our hamartiology section, where we're discussing different Greek words for different sins. Now, influenced by certain Enlightenment assumptions, we like to believe that we all may reserve the right to not believe certain things. We think that we have full authority over that. We think that we have the total right to believe or not believe whatever we want. But in Scripture, to believe not is described as a sin. The verb used to describe this unbelief in Scripture is apisteo. Apisteo. The male disciples had been told by Jesus that he was going to come back from the dead, and then, when he did, and the women testified that they had seen him, refused to believe it anyway. That's in Mark 16:11. And they, when they had heard that he was alive and had been seen of her, believed not. Apisteo. And their words, the words of the women, and their words seemed to them as idle tales, and they believed them not. That's in Luke 24:11. Of course, the disciples were eventually persuaded, and their shock at that time is described in a figure of speech that was not sinful. They believed not for joy. Luke 24:41. In other words, it's described as they're not believing, but it's like an overjoyed person saying, I don't believe it, well, when they do believe it. Jesus tells his disciples that the message that they were to preach to the nations was a winnowing message. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. There it is again, Mark 16:16. And this is how the message has worked from the first century until now. Some who hear believe, and others do not. And some believed the things which were spoken, and some believed not. Acts 28:24. Now God is not thrown down from his throne by our unbelief. How could that be? For what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? That's in Romans 3:3. God will work out his good purposes regardless of the unbelief shown by the ultimate rebels, and he will work over, around, through, and into the temporary unbelief of his weak children. If we believe not, there it is again, if we believe not, yet he abideth faithful, he cannot deny himself. That's 2 Timothy 2:13. So our book review for this episode is a book by a gent named Gogek, Gogek. Gogek. Don't know if that's how it's pronounced. It's probably Polish for Smith or something. I don't know. Gogek. And then the name of the book is Marijuana Debunked. Marijuana Debunked. I just recently finished this, and I thought it was quite good, very, very thorough. And I thought it's time we talked about this. The reason little background, the reason I read this book is I'm doing research for a book of my own that Canon Press has commissioned. That we're calling it different things. One candidate is "Thou shalt not pot." Another one is "Devoured by Cannabis." I prefer that one, "Devoured by Cannabis." I've written on this before, and there's an appendix in the book Future Men on liberty and marijuana that's going to grow and expand into a book. And I'm doing some background research, background reading on it first. So the thing that is obvious, if you read through the material on this, if you read through the literature on this subject, and not just what you might call the talking points literature. The talking points literature in favor of decriminalization, in favor of medical marijuana, in favor of full legalization in favor of legalizing marijuana as a recreational drug. Um, the there's a lot of money that is to be made selling pot to people who have a demonstrated difficulty with self-control, and so in the campaigns for legalization, the anti-legalization or the anti-decriminalization forces are generally outspent 3-1, 10-1, sometimes 30-1. A lot of money has been poured into the effort to get marijuana legal, and that is an upfront investment. And they're pouring this money in because there's a lot of money to be made. So, and it's one of those things where when people gauge that the time is right for a particular movement, like the legalization of pot, all the normal processes that you would go through, all the normal questions that you would ask, don't get asked. So, for example, another example would be the birth control pill. The birth control pill was sacrosanct. It was a sacred thing from the moment of its introduction. So there's no way that they're going to say, oh, yeah, this works to prevent the conception of children, but we have some troublesome issues here. If it were a medicine for your blisters on your ankle, they would run through the whole FDA rigorous approach. But the pill, no. All the basic questions that you would ask about a substance like marijuana just are just not getting asked. So, for example, one of the villains of the piece, one of the villains of our common public discourse now is big tobacco. But when marijuana is legal in all 50 states, what companies do you think are going to get into the marijuana business? Does anybody fail to recognize that this is a huge shot in the arm for big tobacco? Oh, good. Another kind of leaf that you can smoke, and we know how to make cigarettes, and let's get to it, boys. There are all sorts of difficulties. If you have a population that is routinely, regularly smoking pot, you're basically bringing about the land of the lotus eaters, if you know your Homer, where basically it's just going to sap energy, innovation, creativity, as creative as people like to feel they are when they're high. They're not. The drug is implicated in increased traffic fatalities, increased traffic accidents and fatalities. It's difficult to in states that have legalized marijuana. There are certain jobs that companies are going to, like oil drilling, that sort of thing, blue collar, heavy equipment jobs, that you're going to have a hard time keeping people on, because the half-life of alcohol, you could have a guy go on a bender on the weekend and have the alcohol largely out of his system by work Monday morning. The active ingredient in alcohol has got a very short half-life. But THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, has a very long half-life. It doesn't go away rapidly. It doesn't go away quickly. This book shows. This book is written by a psychiatrist. It's not written from a believing perspective, but he is someone who has dealt with a lot of people who are users, and one of the things he points out is that this is one of those things where I precede it by saying correlation is not the same thing as causation, but there's a strong correlation between the use of pot and schizophrenia, particularly when someone starts becoming a regular user at a very young age. There are all sorts of dangers. There are all sorts of problems. There are all sorts of public policy issues that are just flat being ignored or buried or suppressed. I'm going to be writing on this as a way of equipping Christians to know how to answer people who say, "What's the big deal? We live in a state where it's legal. Isn't it just like your glass of wine with dinner?" The answer is no, it isn't. Marijuana is a drug that brings with it significant dangers, and I think we need to be informed on those dangers before we proceed down this road any further. Marijuana Debunked by Gogek is a good place to start.
You've spent a pleasant half hour with Plodcast proprietor Douglas Wilson. This podcast is produced by Canon Press. Please take a moment to subscribe to the Plodcast on your favorite listening platform. To hear more from Doug, please visit canonpress.com.